Recording in progress. We were speaking about the idea of the Doir of the Ikus of the Mashiach, that our generation is the primary generation for which the Oitzris of above is given, because we have the level of Mesiris Nefesh, in some ways more so than in previous generations, and because of our Mesiris Nefesh, that is why it's administered to that's why it's distributed to our generation, the most precious level of the treasure that's not revealed to anyone, that's not shared with anyone, and so on. So now, on the 5th page of the Maimer, Ois Gimel, line 8, page Chavdalit, he goes on to explain what this Oitzer is. Gimel. To be able to explain the idea of the treasure above. Maybe Behemshcha Maimer, so on going in the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe, he brings down, starting from chapter Yud Beis, as Divrei Tikkun Zohar, what the Tikkun Zohar says, Oidens of Lamaila, Maila den Ketz, the infinite light of Hashem, is way high above to no end. Ulamata Mata den Tachlis, it's very low to no end as well. After explaining the idea of how low the Oiden Sof reaches, in the Pedik Tezvav, so in the 15th chapter, so the Rebbe says in the brackets, that is the chapter that's associated with this year. After studying the 20 chapters of the Hemshech over the first 20 years of the cycle, in other words, going from Tafshin Yud Aleph through Tafshin Lamed. So then on Tafshin Lamed Aleph 1971 we began the cycle again. Sha'oz Nasa, after learning it for 20 years, Sha'oz Nasa Inyan Ben Esrim Roy Limker Lisa Velitim Benichsei Aviv. The halacha brings down, the Gemara brings down, that if a person that is under 20 inherits his father's estate, he cannot sell or do business in his father's estate until he's 20 years old. The Chazal deem him as being either immature or having an attitude of easy come, easy go, that, it came to him easily, he doesn't inherit it, so he may not give the appropriate consideration of doing business with it. But the Rebbe obviously takes this deeper, and he says that 20 years is a significant amount of time in the development of our minds and our intellect and maturity and so on. So 20 years of doing these particular types of halachas and dealing with not just the halachas, but also the issues of learning and studying Basi Legani, that has significance. So he says, so then we learn it a second time around. It's a double time that we're learning it, as it says, for a strength. When we double something, that strengthens things. This year is the 15th year of the second time that we're learning it. So therefore, it has the double power of not just that we learned it in 1965 in Tafshin Chafei, now we're learning it in Tafshin Memei. So the Rebbe continues in line 19, Mascha Levayir, in the 15th Pedic, he begins to explain, Ma'u Inyan L'mayla den Ketz, what's the idea that it's above to no end? So he says, that the L'mayla den Ketz is the Oitzer of above. It's not the Lamata Mata the Intachlis. Like we said, the Lamata Mata the Intachlis is only brought into the Hemshech just so we can be able to understand what is the Lamaila den Ketz. It's not about, it's that, and that is the Oitzer, that's the treasure that's being given. So he says, and he explains concerning this, the Frierdiker Rebbe in his Maimer, the Kashem Shoyna Sofel Lamata Mata Bispashtas Vigilu Yadin Shirum Isperklal. Just like the infinite light of Hashem reaches down very much below in its expansiveness and revelation to no measure and to no number whatsoever, like was explained in the previous chapters, about how Hashem's infinite power results in like almost infinite creations and so on, and different ways how Hashem's infinite power manifests itself down here. In a similar vein, the infinite light of Hashem is higher and higher to no end. In the concealment of the light, it's one concealment following another concealment. And in general, that's the idea of the constriction that takes place, and because of the constriction and the tzimtzum, that's why the light becomes more and more concealed as it goes on and on. So now, the topic that the Rebbe's Maimer in Tov Mem Hey is going to analyze is the concept of tzimtzum, and how far up does tzimtzum go. And essentially, the Rebbe is going to speak about something that's rarely discussed. And at the time when the Maimer was said, everybody was like talking about it a lot. And there's even follow-up Fabrengens where the Rebbe elaborated upon the idea of the tzimtzums that not usually we look at tzimtzum Arishan. It's called the first tzimtzum. That's the first tzimtzum. Tzimtzum b'derech siluk, tzimtzum b'derech the way of removing all the light. But the Rebbe is going to talk over here that really beyond that, there's also other tzimtzumim. So again, the bottom of page 5, line 27, Ois Dalet. Beer the Indian explanation of the matter, Dini Av Shebeitz Chaim Isa. Shat tzimtzum Arishan, who, top of the next page, Hat tzimtzum B'Ein Sof. The first tzimtzum was the tzimtzum in the infinite light of Hashem. Initially, the infinite light of Hashem filled up all entire existence, and therefore there was no room for the worlds to exist, and therefore we needed to have the tzimtzum harishon. We need to have that first tzimtzum to remove all that oir, to allow for place of the worlds to come into being. So the Rebbe says that doesn't mean just because we're using the term tzimtzum harishon, that literally it's the first tzimtzum. It means in general for the Seder Ishtalshus, it's a major event and began the whole ball rolling of the Seder Ishtalshus. But in truth, he says in line 3, still no, it's brought down Kabbalah, and Chassidus is brought down on rare occasions. The Rebbe says Pa'amim Nediris is very interesting. That's rare about it. And there's like a follow-up Maimer to this, a continuation of this Maimer that we're going to learn in Meretz Hashem, that he's going to mention this as well and elaborate upon this as well. Shagam lifnei tzimtzum harishon, even before the first tzimtzum, haya initial tzimtzum, there was also a tzimtzum. And the Rebbe is going to explain what that tzimtzum was about, why was there a need for tzimtzum, and so on. It says in line 5, Yuvin said this will be understood, according to what it's known, the noise of in addition to the fact that when we talk about light, it has no significance, it's incomparable to the luminary. In other words, when you have any light source, and then you have the light that comes out of the light source is something substantial, something that you build, etc. The light is like, it's ephemeral, it has no substance, it has no, like we said, value in comparison to the light source. Whether it's an artificial light source or whether we talk about, let's say, the sun, the light that comes out of the sun, what significance does it have for the huge ball of the sun that's going through all the nuclear explosions or whatever that's giving off the light over there? And the Rebbe adds in the parentheses, Hainum, Shuhu be'ein aroich gam legabi ha'inyan dema'ir sheba'atzmos. It's incomparable even in comparison to the luminary aspect of Hashem's essence. In other words, like this. Chassidus explains, the Rebbe talks about it, that there's Hashem's essence, and Hashem's essence is the luminary from which the light comes out from. But in truth, Hashem's essence is much more than just being a luminary. Therefore, to say that the light has no significance in comparison to the essence of Hashem, to Atzmos, that's a given. But even that aspect of Atzmos, that this is like, part is not the correct word, but this aspect of Atzmos is about being a luminary. So even the luminary aspect of Atzmos, when you take the light in comparison to the luminary aspect of Atzmos, that's also insignificant. And because of that, to be able to come from Atzmos, or even to come from the luminary of Atzmos to the light, obviously there must be a tzimtzum. That's already a very logical progression and understanding of why there must be a tzimtzum before the tzimtzum harishon. The tzimtzum harishon was to remove the light so it should be able to be placed for the world. But how did you have the light in the first place? How do you go from luminary, and definitely how do you go from Atzmos to a light? They're totally different. There had to be tzimtzum. But not only that transition to go from Atzmos to the light, you needed to have a quote-unquote tzimtzum, if you will. Again, Atzmos did not constrict itself, but however we're going to define, if we're able to even define tzimtzum over there, even once we've overcome that hurdle of reaching from ma'or to or, from the luminary to the light, even in the light itself, there are stages of tzimtzum, as we will go on to explain. Line 8. In also in the light itself, when it's drawn down from the luminary and expands to be in an existence of light, it's incomparable. The light, the way it comes out of its source, to the light, the way it's in the source. I'm not talking about the light in comparison to the luminary, or the light comparison to the essence. We're talking about there's the light, the way it's still within the luminary. Like he says, the Mashal and Tanya, the light, the way it's still within the ball of the sun. And then there's the light, the way it comes out of the sun. The light that comes out of the sun is insignificant or incomparable to the power and significance of the light that's within the sun. Move on. So from this is understood, he says in line 11, the Mekivan Shagam Ha'er Shalifnei HaTzimtzum. Since also the light prior to the Tzimtzum is in a state of revelation, it's a Metzias, it's an existence called light. Especially what type of existence, what type of revelation it is. It's a type of revelation that already relates somewhat to the world. What do we mean? He's going to explain in a moment, but let me first say it outside. The very fact that you're saying that this light, if left as it is, would interfere with the world, and therefore you need to remove the light to be able to have place for the world, that shows that there's at least a negative relationship between the light and the world. If there would be no common ground whatsoever, you wouldn't need to remove anything. A silly example. I want to put a table in this place. Nobody's going to say, there's an idea floating around over here, or there's radio waves moving around over here, and you can't put the table over here until you move the idea out of the way, before you move the radio waves out of the way. The whole idea of intellect or radio waves doesn't live on the same plane of existence as a table. Therefore, you don't have to move it away to be able to put a table over here. The fact that we need to move the light aside to be able to place the worlds into the place that that light previously occupied, that shows that the light somehow is in some way on the same plane of existence as the worlds, and that's why we have to move it aside. Let's see it inside. How do we know? In other words, he's going to prove now, how do we know that the Gili is in such a way that's shaykh to the worlds? So he says in line 14, the movement, even though it's a Da'ir stuff before the Tzimtzum, it's a very high light. So he says in line 14, the movement, Gam Masha Kosu Beitz Chaim, Sham. Also, like it's understood from most of what it says over there in the Eitz Chaim. The Gasher Oirin Safa Yamalas Mok Machol, when the infinite light of Hashem filled all the area of the space. It was impossible to be the existence of the worlds. This indicates that infinite light of Hashem, the infinite light of the Ein Sof, it is associated and has a connection with the existence of the worlds, at least in a negative manner, in a way that it cannot tolerate it, and the worlds cannot exist in its presence. So therefore, how do we get to a light that's in a state of Gilui from the light that's in a state of Hiskalus? Because the way the light was kolul in the Ma'or, it did not interfere with the worlds. The proof of that is because when the Tzimtzum took place, where do you think the light went? The light went back to be kolul in the Ma'or. So we see that the light in the Ma'or, the light in the luminary, the light in Atzmos doesn't interfere with the world. The light, the way it comes out of Atzmos, does interfere with the world. How did that transition take place? How did that massive difference between this light and this light take place? Through Tzimtzum, line 19, why the initial Tzimtzum, the way it came down, the way it was drawn down. The light that's in a state of revelation, the light that wouldn't allow the worlds to exist. How did it come down? From the light that was within the Ma'or, within the luminary, is why the initial Tzimtzum, it's through the idea of Tzimtzum. Top of page Chavav. Say you've much cause of Admar Am Tzemach Tzedek. The Sefer HaMitzvah Loi, would this be understood what the Tzemach Tzedek writes in the Sefer called Derech Tzesecham? At Mitzvah Tefillah he says, Be'inyan habchina sheba haya tzimtzum, concerning the level in which the tzimtzum took place. So the Tzemach Tzedek writes, quote, V're'isik sav yad kodesh mimoiri v'rabi hagodl Adoni Avi Zikni Moiri V'Rabi Nishmase Eden. I saw a manuscript of my master and my great teacher, my grandfather. In other words, the Tzemach Tzedek is quoting a manuscript of the Alter Rebbe, Shekina Lebechina Zu B'Shem Yecholos, that he named this level in which the Tzimtzum had to take place as the level of Yecholos, the capability, the possibility for light. So the Rebbe is going to explain what this means. Line 6. The idea behind this is the Lachura Yidua Mavor Macher Shat Tzimtzum Hoya Ba'or B'Shabechinas Gili. How does this fit in? It's known and it's explained in a different place that the Tzimtzum took place in the light that was in a state of revelation. The Alter Rebbe that the Tzemach Tzedek is quoting is saying that Tzimtzum took place in the level of the light, the way it's not yet a light, the way it's only a potential, a capability for light. It's not yet light in the way of revelation. But in other places, it says openly, it's the light of revelation. He says in the parentheses, it could move a gamma sefer mitzvah sham, like it's brought down that very same place in Derech Tzesechah on Sheish Mitzvah Tefillah. Shat Tzimtzum hoya ba'or shoyra malas mok macholol. The Tzimtzum was in the light that filled the entire empty space. It's not talking about the essence of the light, the capability of the light. It was in the way it expanded and filled all possible space. How does it fit with what we just now said, that we're calling the level in which the tzimtzum took place, the level of Yechoilus? Yechoilus is not Ispashtus Oyer. Yechoilus is not Gili. On the one hand, we're saying that the tzimtzum was in the place that the Oyer was filling the whole entire space. That shows on Gilui, and that shows on Ispashtus and expansion. On the other hand, he's bringing from the Alter Rebbe that it was in the level of Yechoilus, in the level of potential, capability, no state of revelation. So therefore the Rebbe answers this contradiction, line 12, Al Pi HaNizkar Le'el, according to what we mentioned before, that there are also tzimtzumim prior to the tzimtzum addition. Yesh loy masha kavanosi gam le'inyan hatzimtzum HaNizkar Le'el shelifnei hatzimtzum addition. We could say that the intention of the Tzemach Tzedek and the intention of the Alter Rebbe is also to the idea of the tzimtzum that's mentioned before, that there was tzimtzumim before the tzimtzum addition. Hainu letnuas hatzimtzum shebe'or hakolol, that there was this movement of tzimtzum. Again, it's very hard to speak about tzimtzum when you're dealing with Hashem's essence, and we're talking about a light that's included and a part of Hashem's essence. So he calls it the tnuah of tzimtzum, the concept, the movement of tzimtzum. That's in that light that's included in Hashem's essence. Shal Yodoi, that through that level of tenuah of the tzimtzum, Hayam Shachas V'Gili Arsh Lifnei Tzimtzum. So there came about the drawing down and the revelation of light that was prior to the tzimtzum. So therefore, because it's about that transition, we're talking about a tzimtzum between the light, the way it's part of Hashem's essence, to coming out to the revelation of light before the tzimtzum. So therefore it's understood how the Alter Rebbe called it V'zeh Mashakino Lebechinazu B'Shem Yechoilus. That is why he named this level in which the tzimtzum took place, meaning the oir that was kolol in Hashem's essence, he calls it potential, capability, Lefisha oir hakol b'moir, because the light, the way it's still part of and included within the luminary, kefishu nimshal amayla, the way it is in the nimshal above. In other words, the sunlight down here may not be just Yechoilus. The sunlight, the way it's part of the sun, may be more than just Yechoilus. But at least the light, the way it is in the sun, in the luminary above, is in a level of Yechoilus. Like it's explained over there at length by the Tzemach Tzedek. So therefore, we to be able to get from that level of Yechoilus, to be able to get from that level of potential, you needed to have a tzimtzum to reach that level of potential to the Gilui. That's not the only level of tzimtzum. There had to be a tzimtzum addition, but there was also a tzimtzum in the level of Yechoilus. In the next paragraph, the Rebbe is going to go on to explain that that's not the only tzimtzum that there had to be between the oir that's part of the ma'or to come out to an oir that's outside of the ma'or. There still needs to be other stages of transition to be able to go from the level of the oir, the way it's part of the ma'or, to be a level of oir that's so expansive and so full that it doesn't let any place for the worlds, as we will speak about tomorrow, Be'ezus Hashem.